Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Attention Please podcast, now on video. If you like this podcast, kindly like, share, subscribe. You know what to do. So the topic for today's discussion is going to be layoffs. Now, this is a particularly good time. I don't know if you can use the word good time to talk about layoffs, which are inherently bad for everyone, I say. It's bad for the companies doing it, and it's definitely bad for the person being laid off. So for those of you who are possibly going to be listening to this, months or years in the future, this podcast is being recorded in the context of a second set of massive layoffs in big tech. So there were second round of layoffs in Amazon, in Microsoft, and in Google. And at least Google, I don't think it has ever had a layoff on this scale before. This podcast is not to explain specifically the layoffs in these companies. I've already done a podcast on that, where I basically lampooned the woke CEO of today sending an "I'm sorry" email, as if, first of all, anybody cares once they have been laid off whether you're sorry or not. And essentially the hypocrisy behind this "I'm sorry," because this was inevitable, it was going to happen. And I've explained everything with respect to the finances, the profits, and the economics that goes behind this unrestrained growth, which is, everybody knows that it's not going to last. At some point of time, the bottom is going to fall out of the market, and people who did not gain on the upside are going to lose on the upside. And this is the unfortunate nature of many of these companies. But again, today's podcast is not going to be on that, because I've already talked about this before. Maybe I'll talk about it again someday. I want to talk about layoffs. I want to talk about what you can do to manage a layoff. And I say this as somebody who has been laid off, by the way. So, and maybe that's perhaps the most important thing, is that there is no shame in being laid off. Okay, that's the first important thing, which comes to the first question that I want to handle. Why is it traumatic to be laid off? Let's agree it is traumatic. There is no easy way of putting this. To get that "I'm sorry" email from your CEO, or to be called in by HR and being asked to surrender your laptop, there is no doubt that a layoff is traumatic. So why are they traumatic? So in order for us to, I'm not saying you'll ever get rid of the trauma, but in order to control the sadness, we first need to understand why is it traumatic for us. So the first reason why it's traumatic is just that it's surprising. For most of us who are not there's some people who are in the level of management that they can see a layoff coming. And so they might be emotionally prepared. But for many people, it's a bolt from the blue. I mean, they would, in general, perhaps know that the company is not doing well, but they wouldn't think that they were particularly in the crosshairs. It usually happens that, and even if you can say it in the abstract, it's always a shock when the thing actually happens, no matter how many times you have played it in your head. So first of all, you need to accept, everybody needs to accept that it's traumatic. Don't tell anybody, what happened? No, so it's definitely something. And I can say this myself from having suffered the trauma that it is. So the first thing is, the first reason why I believe it's traumatic is, again, we expect our jobs to be permanent. There is some expectation that it is permanent, even though it's not, right? A permanent job in today's world is a facade. Even the notion of you have a permanent job, we say that, we put on our LinkedIn, but it's never permanent. We are basically like an Uber driver. So everybody, even a person who's working on contract, you are no different as a permanent employee from the guy working on contract, honestly. It's everything in terms of permanence is, as I said, a facade. So you're basically like an Uber driver. The contract guy, the guy who's working on contract, at least that person has a limited time period by which they know that the customer will get off at this station or at this point. You're a Uber driver where the customer doesn't tell you when the customer is going to get off. At some point of time, the customer is going to say, "Stop here." And the customer is going to get down and you'll get a small penalty. The customer will pay you a small penalty for not telling you the destination beforehand, if you're lucky, by the way. So that's really what a permanent job is. And you should internalize that always. At least with a contract job, and based on the way you wrote the contract, they may have to pay out, the company that gave you the contract may have to pay you out for the rest of the contract if you met all your contractual obligations. And many times layoffs are not for performance at all. They just get rid of business units that have not been functioning well, or functions that have not been functioning well. And you're part of it, but you might have no responsibility in the not performing well. It could be sales, which is letting you down, and research and development gets fired. And that happens all the time. So the second thing about why layoffs are traumatic, it comes back to the thing that we think it's our fault. Somehow we think that we could have done, the person who laid off, we could have done something differently. It's somehow our fault. And this is perhaps a result of growing up middle class in India, at least for me, is that in our days, most people used to work in government jobs, where jobs were actually permanent. So losing a job was like, you came under the scrutiny of society. Man, what could you have done to have lost a job? So losing a job was like a personal failing. But in this day and age, it's important for us as a community, as a group, to understand that losing a job means nothing. I mean, it is not a reflection at all on the person who's lost their job. This is just the way. A job is a purely transactional relationship. Getting a job with a company is an extremely transactional relationship, no matter what the company might say in its public posturing. We are family, no matter what they say. This is something which we have to understand. Everybody has to understand that this is the nature of the beast. There is no shame and there is no personal culpability when you get laid off. So do not blame yourself. And the third reason why layoffs are traumatic is because a job to us in many ways is a signifier of our place in the order of things. It's that society values us. So when we are let go, it hits us as if society or the universe is saying that we are not needed, we are redundant. And it's not that we consciously articulate the pain of being laid off in this way, but it comes down to this actually. So first of all, and this is very important, is the only way to counter this sense. One thing is, of course, that many of us who work, we buy into the mission of a company. Many companies have missions, right? So we become passionate about the jobs we do. We become passionate for two reasons: because we believe in the company's mission. We believe we're doing something for society on the world and we're getting paid for it. That's good, but we're doing something. And also we believe that we're doing something for ourselves. We are moving ahead. So the only way, and I'm not saying that you can ever control for this kind of pain, that everything you've been working towards is suddenly terminated. But I think the only control, and I use the word control a lot being in cybersecurity. So this is like basically that, how to reduce the risk of something happening, is that do not think of yourself in terms of your role in the company only. I've seen many people who define their identity in terms of their jobs. Even after they leave their jobs, they will put ex-Googler, ex-McKinsey, as if that is a label that they want to carry along with them. Even when they no longer have the label, it's like if I say ex-Mercedes owner kind of thing. So this to me sounds, besides the LinkedInese of this, what I find, I don't want to use the word problematic. If that's how you want to define yourself, go ahead. But this just means that you see yourself as part of that quote unquote unit, always, even after you have left it, voluntarily or involuntarily. And that is a problem, because now you feel the pain of being left out of a tribe. It's like what happens to, and I don't mean this in any bad way, but it happens to pets who are abandoned, right? Because they believe that they're part of a tribe. Their family is their tribe and they have been abandoned. So once you start defining yourself as a member of that tribe, obviously that sense of abandonment comes in. And the answer to it is don't. Remember, it is very transactional. You are there and you're a resource. Human resources. The word is human, but straight after that is a resource. You're a resource. Just like a computer and a printer is a resource, you are a resource. So if the computer or the printer starts thinking of themselves as essentially belonging to the company that procured them, then we will understand that there is a problem, because there will be obsolescence at one point of time. They will be junked. So you have to stop defining yourself in terms of the place you work or the role you have. This is very important. especially when you get laid off. I mean, if you never get laid off, maybe you can get away with this. But if you do get laid off and you define yourself purely by the company that you belong to or the role you occupy, then yes, it is going to be traumatic for you. So the next thing is, well, how do we manage for layoffs? So the first thing is, of course, is to, not live paycheck to paycheck. And I know that that's not an option for many people, but if you have an option, try to save money. Try to save money to bide you out for 6 months so that the moment they hand you the pink slip, your first worry isn't where am I going to get the next meal from or how I'm going to pay rent. Having said that, there are many people who work in jobs where this is inevitable and there's in a way no control for that. The second thing is, this is very important when you are employed. So you can take proactive steps to counter or control for that feeling of helplessness, which will happen if you get laid off. This is always keep looking for new jobs, even if you have no plans to move. Always try to evaluate your worth in the market. What kind of skills is the market looking for in your domain? It is not a good idea, and I've seen many people, it happened to many people. I last updated my resume 15 years ago. I've worked faithfully for this company for 15 years. Well, the reason why you've worked in the company for 15 years is you were lucky that you managed to work in the company for 15 years. So what you should absolutely do while you're employed, and you might be very happy with your role, very happy with your job, very good for you, but you should always keep looking for new jobs, even if you have no plans to move. See what's in demand. See what kind of skills companies are looking for in your domain. Connect with recruiters. I mean, remember, the day you get laid off, your first contacts are going to be these recruiters. So maintain a network of recruiters. Send a hi to them on LinkedIn from time to time. You just keep it warm. Keep these relationships warm. Keep your out network. This is a network you need to successfully transition to the next role. Maintain that network when you are in your current employment. Always keep your resume current. I make it a point every 6 months to update my resume. And this attitude of thinking that I have to update my resume actually helps you when we go to the next point. Final thing, being a little facetious, in the job market, it is perfectly okay to look around even when you're in a committed relationship. Don't quote me on that. Mind you, in a job search, in the job market, which takes us to the next point, which is when you're at your current role, always try to take new kinds of assignments at work. Expand the kind of work that you do. Search them out. Your manager might not come to you with a project in, let's say, a different language or a different tech platform. I don't know what you do, but you know that there are some variations. You don't have to keep on doing the exact same thing every day in most jobs. Now, in some jobs, which I would say are not great jobs, it's like if you flip burgers in McDonald's, you can't go and say, tomorrow I want to do something else. You don't have that amount of flexibility in these kinds of jobs. But in software or, in management, program management, project management, you do have a little bit of wiggle room in the kind of projects that you want. And again, some places you might not have. I'm not saying that everybody can. But always look out for that. And that brings me to keeping your resume current. You should always try to add 1 or 2 new things every time you rev your resume up. See, if you keep on doing the same thing again and again, nobody's going to say in resume, I did this 4 times or I did this 5 times. That's not important. You should always have a broad number of arrows in your quiver so that when you go out in the job market, all you need is 1 arrow to hit 1 role. That's it. You don't need everything. Nobody's work history perfectly aligns with their next job. It doesn't have to. You just need to bring in 1 skill that they need. That's all. That's as simple as that. And I want to specifically focus on those in middle management, kind of people our age, most of us, because they are really the number 1 targets for layoffs. It's usually not the individual contributors. Sometimes, and I see this time, a lot of freshers who were let go. But usually, again, I'm saying generally it's middle management which typically gets the brunt of layoffs. See, the highest management are the guys who are taking the decision, right? They're not going to lay themselves off. So they will go for the next run. And this is very important, is that even when you go on to management, where you're managing projects or managing people, keep your street cred as an individual contributor. Delegate. Of course, you have to delegate as a manager, but do not delegate everything. Keep the tough technical challenges to yourself, at least a few of them. And there are two reasons for that. One is obviously when you keep the tough technical challenges, you stay abreast of the latest technologies and the latest trends. So you have something which is always sellable. People are not always looking for managers. There's a market for managers. Everybody can be a manager ultimately, but it's core knowledge of technology and skills that people are looking for in the market when you first go into a company. Once you go into a company, then you demonstrate your core competence and then you manage. That's the way things work typically. So these kinds of handling these tough technical projects, even though you don't need to, even though you could technically delegate them, this is your biggest hedge against going out and then finding nobody biting your resume. This is the biggest hedge. And there's another good reason why you should do it. Firstly, your company, your senior management should also know that even though you're middle management, you still handle a very important fragment of their technical pie or their project pipeline. So if they lay you off, something immediate walks out of the door. So you'll find in general that people who have this, even middle management who still maintain their strong technical competence, even if their entire division gets laid off, they usually move internally to another division. It usually happens that usually companies are not ready to let these guys walk out the door, even if their programs are stopped or their projects are terminated, because they have a skill which they believe is getting it from outside is going to cost them a lot more than just keeping the guy. Because ultimately, again, this is not a thing about people. It's capitalism, right? You're a resource. So there is, which brings me to the last thing. On the day of the layoff, do not take this personally. Remember that whatever happens to you, everybody, ultimately it is personal, right? There's somebody coming and there's somebody saying you're no longer required, hand over your badge, hand over your laptop. Do not take it personally. They represent a system. They are doing their jobs. So it's not them. And it's not you also who's getting fired in a way. This is just the way things work. If you read the Gita, this is the dharma of the whole thing. There's nothing adharmic about this. This is the way it's supposed to be. So do not take it personally at all. I would say do not show any kind of emotion at all. Okay, fine, your services are no longer needed. Thank you. Give your badge, walk away. Do not lash out on social media. I've seen some people do it. Do not lash out on social media, no matter how you're feeling. I'm not saying you won't feel bad. It's easy for me to say do not take it personally, but ultimately everything does come down to personal, but don't express that. Try to tell yourself this. And again, if you listen to what I said, if you have always kept the relation between you and company, you've kept it at the back of your mind that it is purely transactional, that I provide a service, the company invests something in me, and the moment they feel, rightly or wrongly, that they're not getting the return on investment they're making, they will terminate me. If you think on these lines all the time, and so you work firstly in your company to increase the return on investment, and you think, okay, maybe the company does not recognize the return on investment that I provide, but the market will. That is, again, the good thing about capitalism. A good thing about a true capitalist society is that if one place does not recognize the return that you bring on investment and you actually do, then there'll always be somebody who will. That's why capitalism works. Even though it's cruel, it still works. So when you get laid off, don't take it personally, don't lash out, don't show emotion, go home. Just go home, lie down, take 2 days off. Don't go to LinkedIn, don't start updating a resume if you haven't done it for some time. Don't just play it back in your mind. Don't do any of this. Just go lie down, watch a Netflix movie, watch something on Netflix, read a good book, whatever works for you, take a long walk. I took a lot of long walks, by the way, when it happened to me. So stabilize your mind and then bounce back. I mean, people bounce back after losing a limb. You can absolutely bounce back. If your fundamentals are strong, if you've worked towards it, then there is, yes, I mean, everybody understands that change is always overwhelming. Most of us have families, we just can't move to another place. So there are certain restrictions on what kind of jobs we can take. And we all understand that. That is absolutely okay to have apprehensions and fears. But again, if you have consistently, based on what I told you, you've consistently followed this discipline of updating your resume, seeking out projects that help you build your resume, and you've psychologically always, the corner of your head, prepared yourself for this eventuality. I'm not saying it will not be sad. I'm not saying, because ultimately we do think of ourselves in terms of the place we work, but I think the pain will be much less than if you haven't followed what I have said. So thank you. I would love to hear what you guys think about this topic. It's a very current topic, I would say. It's also a sad topic because, I go to LinkedIn and I see these posts of people who have been laid off, and I feel nothing but terrible for them. Many people on H-1Bs, many fresh graduate students who I feel really bad because they've incurred expense moving to a new place and then being laid off. And I mean, you feel sad, you feel terrible, especially if you've gone through it yourself. But I say you know that this is inevitable in many ways. And it's the only thing is, if you've worked in a place for 10 years, I don't feel that bad for that person, honestly. I think it's okay. I think that person will definitely land on his feet, been at a place for quite some time, and maybe it's a time he should have moved anyways. But when somebody's very new to the job, 1 year, less than 1 year, you can see they've moved across the country, they're on H-1B, this is traumatic. And I'm not saying that anything I'm going to say or anything anybody can say is going to lessen that trauma. But think about what I said, and I would love to hear from you. And I'll see you next time. Until then, stay well. Bye-bye.